I know how media aware you are firsthand. So I know
Hmm.
you have seen the clip that the other side, that Tucker's side of the argument has perpetuated about, well, maybe Israel should have the entire Middle East, right?
Yeah.
And I do think those of us who operate on a biblical worldview, I do on this show, we need to make sure when people who don't maybe understand where we're coming from, or maybe even aren't sure that they agree, that we can respond to a criticism or distinction. So like Tucker, for example, said, well, hey, you guys are always quoting Genesis 12:3 to me. Well, in Genesis 15, God says to, well, he's still Abram then, hey, here are the borders of the land of your descendants, and it includes modern day Egypt and modern day Lebanon and essentially the entire Middle East. And so if this is a prophetic nation, as you all claim, why don't they have those borders? I mean, and that was where you kind of made the comment, well, I mean, yeah, if you'd be fine. I mean, if they essentially took over much of the entire Middle East. His side of the argument absolutely seized on this. Some of these nations, I think, have even released statements in response to this. I viewed
Yes.
this, and I said this to the audience when we reviewed I viewed this as you guys are two alpha males here, man. It's heated. You're having a discussion. I think Tucker did this too, maybe when he talked about Jews should get DNA tests. I think that was kind of him being
Yeah.
exasperated on his end. And I kind of got the view that maybe you were kind of exasperated with some of the things he was raising and just kind of threw this in as an exasperated absurdity. And then, of course, it got picked up on. But I wanted to give you a chance to clarify and react to that because I know you've seen there's been a lot of reaction to that.
Oh, there has. And Steve, there's a saying that I'm sure you've heard, and that is when you tell a half truth as if it is the whole truth, it becomes an untruth. So what Tucker did was he took a portion of what I said. And if you recall, because you've watched it, he was badgering me, trying to get me to say that Israel was going to try to do a conquest from the Euphrates to the Nile. And I
Mm-hmm.
made it very clear. Well, at first, he just kept hammering. And finally, I said, tongue in cheek, yeah, they can have the whole thing. Now, then immediately what I said was, Tucker, Israel is only wanting to keep the land of Canaan, the land that they have, which is right now the land that they are living in. They don't want Lebanon. They don't want Jordan. They don't want Iraq. They don't want Saudi Arabia. They don't want any other land. They want the land that is theirs, and that's it. They don't even want Gaza back, and they certainly don't want Egypt. They gave away the entire Sinai back to Egypt and gave the Palestinian Authority all of Gaza. So here's what Tucker did. Tucker clipped from that one statement, and then he marketed that all over the Arab world, where he apparently has some very strong contacts. Well, they got all spun up and did a blanket condemnation of what I had said. But saying that that's all that I said without giving it the full context and clarifying and giving the thorough answer, it's like saying, by the way, did you see that hockey game between the US and Canada? And if you say, yeah, I saw it all but the last 30 seconds, then I would say you didn't really see the full game because the real essence of the game happened in those last 30 seconds when the US pulled out that miraculous victory. So if you missed the last part of my answer, of course it kind of looks like that I said, yeah, just let them have the whole part, flippantly uh, acting as if, yeah, that's fine with me.
Did
But
you,
if you took it in its context, listen to the whole answer, you come away with a completely different view, unless you just don't want to.
did you hear anything at all, any concern about that statement from the Trump White House or anything at all?
No, because we sent them the full transcript. They saw what I actually said. So, you know, fortunately, they're a lot smarter than some of the people who took Tucker's bait. But sadly, Tucker fished that out there and people were gobbling it up. And there are still, you know, the internet stories that, you know, that I was defying US policy, that I was pushing for a conquest of basically the entirety of the Middle East, none of which was the case. So sure, it was unfortunate that I didn't get to control his editing, um, but I think it was dishonest and disingenuous on Tucker's part. He knew what he was doing. That was not an accident. You know, he's always saying, "Oh, I'm just asking questions. Oh, I'm just curious." No, that was not about asking questions or curious. He had an agenda, and it was to see if he could create a firestorm. But fortunately for me, I think President Trump and the people at the White House and the State Department They're smart enough to listen to the full tape, read the full transcript. So no, there was nobody spun up about it in our government. There were people spun up about it in the Arab nations, and they had these blanket condemnations. But you know what? My attitude is, Steve, if the worst thing that can happen to me is that I get fired and I get recalled, here's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see Tucker Carlson continue his disparaging the president. This is what bothers me. He's not disparaging me, but when he says that President Trump is being led around by Israel and that Israel controls him and that he's doing what Israel wants him to do, and he's not listening to the American people and he's ignoring the American people, that's what I take umbrage at, because that is a direct slam against President Trump, the MAGA movement, the conservative movement, the America First movement. Tucker is working hard to divide the movement, the party. He said about the Republican Party that they're worthless. He hates them. He doesn't want anything to do with them. Does he know who the head of the Republican Party is? It's the president. So I find this very, very troubling that people who claim to be supportive of President Trump are out there saying, oh, I love what Tucker Carlson is saying. Well, if you listen to what he's saying, you can't love President Trump and agree with Tucker Carlson because the two are incompatible.
One of the interesting exchanges you guys had, in fact, you guys had this really several different times, is he kind of ascribed a policy advisory, if not open implementation role upon your job as an ambassador. So I thought that was a reach. And I understand that he's trying to ask questions in a way that doesn't make it look like he's being directly critical of the president, because people can get sensitive about that on our side. And I face that sometimes too in doing my job. But I do think asking an ambassador to be our eyes and ears over there, I do think that's fair. So what would you say to those who want to know, I know you know what just war theory is, and I know you studied all this stuff in seminary and all these various theological debates. Has there been a proportional response from Israel in Gaza? Have they committed genocide in Gaza? This was the first question that I received on the main stage at AmFest when I did the Israel Forum. Okay, the first question I received is whether or not Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. As our eyes and ears over there, as our ambassador, how would you answer that?
I would say it's preposterous to suggest that. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, which, by the way, under international law, requires you to have the intent of purposely killing civilians, specifically children, women, and non-combatants. You have to be willing to eradicate the entire population. The reason that that is preposterous is because if Israel wanted to commit genocide, they could have wiped Gaza out in 2.5 hours. I mean, this is a military that took on the Iranians last summer, a nation 10 times its size, and beat them in 12 days. They have the military capacity. Keep in mind, Gaza is the size of Las Vegas. Now, they built a tunnel system with all that aid money that people sent to them, the billions and billions, and they built a tunnel system larger than the London Underground underneath that area, the size of Las Vegas. But here's why Israel went into the war. People, they just forget this. There was this little date called October the 7th. And on that date, Hamas came across the border. They didn't just kill and murder 1,200 citizens, civilians, but they massacred them. They mutilated their bodies. They raped women in front of their families while the women were still alive, and then mutilated their bodies in front of their families. They set fire to elderly people in wheelchairs. They chopped the heads off of fathers in front of their families and burned babies alive in ovens. They did unspeakable things, and the reason we know they did it, for anyone who says, oh, that didn't really happen, we have the video that was taken by Hamas because they were so proud of it that they wanted the world, and especially the Islamic world, to see what they had done to the Jews. But then, in addition to murdering those 1,200, which, by the way, if that had been in the US and scaled up, it would be the equivalent of murdering 40,000 Americans in half a day. Now, think about that. What would Americans do if some Islamic terror group murdered 40,000 of us and raped our women and butchered our babies and lit our elderly people on fire in their wheelchairs, and then took what would have been about 10,000 hostages, but in the case of Hamas, it was 250 hostages? This war should have ended, could have ended on October the 8th if Hamas had given up the hostages, it could have been over, but they didn't. And they held the hostages. They beat them, they tortured them, they starved them, and they raped them, men and women. And what do you do to get your hostages back? Steve, you and I are both fathers. I'm a grandfather now to 7 grandchildren. I'm going to tell you something. If you were to take my children or my grandchildren hostage, and you were doing to them what Hamas was doing to the sons and daughters of Israel, I got to tell you, there's not anything that I would not be willing to do to save the lives of my family. I would do anything it took. And when people think, well, how come Israel wasn't a little more proportional? How proportionate must you be when your children are being raped and starved and brutalized by these savages? What do you expect Israel to do? And they tried ceasefires. They tried going soft. They tried going hard. But what they never, ever quit doing was trying to rescue the sons and the daughters that had been taken hostage.
We've got about 3 minutes here. When you went into this interview, what were you hoping to accomplish? And do you think that you did?
I wanted to let the world know that we don't need to be afraid of Tucker Carlson, that he has built a lot of straw men, that he is dishonest, that he is divisive. I wanted them to understand that the things that he's saying about Israel, when he says that Christians are treated poorly here, that's not true. Steve, I live here. I've been coming here for 53 years. My first trip was in 1973. I wanted to push back on that nonsense because Christians have all the freedoms and rights of citizenship here. They don't have it in Qatar. They don't have it in Jordan. They don't have it in the Palestinian Authority. If you convert from Islam to Christianity in the Palestinian Authority, they may not kill you, but legally they have the right to. It's in their law. So for him to say, oh, these poor Christians are treated horribly in Israel, but they're treated wonderfully over in the Palestinian Authority, that's not just wrong, that's a lie. It's a blatant lie. I feel like that when you let things go unchallenged, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owenses of the world who say horrible things, if you don't challenge it, then you're agreeing with it. My high school speech teacher used to drill that into us. He would say, silence is agreement. And if there's something that is wrong and hurtful and you say nothing, then you are in essence agreeing to it. That's what led us to the Holocaust, where people just looked the other way. And sadly, a lot of Christians did. But thankfully, a lot of Christians didn't. There were Christians, whether they were Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the White Rose group in Munich, a group of college students that ended up having their heads cut off by the Nazis because as Christians, they stood up for Jews, they marched for Jews, and they paid with their lives. So there were Christians who did the right thing, but there were a lot of people who kept their mouths shut as self-preservation. If we allow lies to be told as truth and we don't challenge it, then shame on us.
Final question for you. I've got about 2 minutes here. You're in a unique position, and you're in a unique time in that position, in that your boss, President Trump, has at the same time been, maybe the strongest ally Israel's ever had in a White House, has also forged uniquely strong bonds with the Arab world as well, which is why he crafted the Abrahamic Accords and things of that nature. How do you wrestle with that tension as the ambassador to Israel on behalf of the United States, knowing that at the same time, the president does have some friends in Riyadh, does have friends in Amman and in Cairo and in Dubai? How do you wrestle with that when those relationships for your predecessors largely were not nearly as prevalent as they are today?
Well, first of all, I thank God President Trump is in office because no one has done more for the people of Israel, the state of Israel, and the Jewish people than President Trump. And I believe that that is the source of a blessing. Look, I believe Genesis. Those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. I want America to be blessed. But the fact that he makes friends with people in the Arab world, good for him. What I would say is that he envisions a world where Jew and Muslim, where Israeli and Arab can get along and can stop with the violence that has often been a part of the Middle East, and that other nations would experience a world of freedom, freedom of thought. Israel is the only democracy in this neighborhood. There is no other. It's the one place they elect their government, they can criticize it, and boy, do they ever do it. But you're free, and Arabs have spaces in the Knesset and help govern the country. They have places on the Supreme Court, make court decisions. They can serve in the military, so can Christians. So this idea that this is a apartheid society, what nonsense. If it's apartheid, I got to tell you, Steve, they're really bad at it. So the president, I think, is looking for a way to build bridges rather than roadblocks. And for that, I'm grateful and I'm happy to be here. And I hope to help him build some of those bridges.